Well, good morning to you. It is Wednesday morning, and this morning we're going to read Acts 27. We're going to start at verse 9 and read through about verse 34. It's a long reading, but I don't see a reason to break the story up for several days. So they're sailing, right? Sailing around the coast of Crete. Since much time had passed, and the voyage was now dangerous because even the fast was already over, Paul advised them, saying, "Sirs, I perceive that the voyage will be with injury and much loss, not only of the cargo and the ship, but also of our lives." But the centurion paid more attention to the pilot and the owner of the ship than to what Paul said. And because the harbor was not suitable to spend the winter in, the majority decided to put out to sea from there on the chance that they could somehow reach Phoenix, a harbor of Crete, facing both southwest and northwest, and spend the winter there. Now when the south wind blew gently, supposing that they had obtained their purpose, they weighed anchor and sailed along Crete close to the shore. But soon a tempestuous wind called the nor'easter struck down from the land. And when the ship was caught and could not face the wind, we gave way to it and were driven along. Running under the lee of a small island called Cauda, we managed with difficulty to secure the ship's boat. After hoisting it up, they used supports to undergird the ship. Then, fearing that they would run aground on the Syrtis, they lowered the gear, and thus they were driven along. Since we were violently storm-tossed, they began the next day to jettison the cargo. And on the third day they threw the ship's tackle overboard with their own hands. When neither sun nor stars appeared for many days, and no small tempest lay on us, all hope of our being saved was at last abandoned. Since they had been without food for a long time, Paul stood up among them and said, "Men, you should have listened to me and not set sail from Crete, and incurred this injury and loss. Yet now I urge you to take heart, for there will be no loss of life among you, but only of the ship. For this very night there stood before me an angel of the God to whom I belong and whom I worship. And he said, 'Do not be afraid, Paul, you must stand before Caesar. And behold, God has granted you all those who sail with you. So take heart, men, for I have faith in God, that it will be exactly as I have been told. But we must run aground on some island.' When the 14th night had come, as they were being driven across the Adriatic Sea, about midnight the sailors suspected that they were nearing land. So they took a sounding and found 20 fathoms. A little further on they took a sounding again and found 15 fathoms. And fearing that we might run on the rocks, they let down 4 anchors from the stern and prayed for day to come. And as the sailors were seeking to escape from the ship and had lowered the ship's boat into the sea, under the pretense of laying out anchors from the bow, Paul said to the centurion and the soldiers, 'Unless these men stay in the ship, you cannot be saved.' Then the soldiers cut away the ropes of the ship's boat and let it go. As the day was about to dawn, Paul urged them all to take some food, saying, 'Today is the 14th day that you have continued in suspense and without food, but having taken nothing. Therefore I urge you to take some food, for it will give you strength. For not a hair is to perish from the head of any of you.' And when he'd said these things, he took bread, and giving thanks to God in the presence of all, he broke it and began to eat. Then they all were encouraged and ate some food themselves. We were in all 276 persons in the ship, and when they had eaten enough, they lightened the ship, throwing the wheat into the sea." So that was a long reading, but we see that basically the ship is out of control. The wind is driving it across the Adriatic Sea, which is that water that's between Greece on one side and Turkey on the other, and lots and lots of little islands in there, and they're zooming around in there. They don't know where they are. They don't know where they're going. They're just hoping to find some land to stop this boat and get off the ship and be on the land. So that's what's going on in this bit of Acts. What's going to happen is that they're going to they're going to run aground and be rescued, but it's we're not quite there yet. We learn a lot about ancient sailing, though, in this passage. They didn't have any of the stuff that we have. When it says they took soundings, we imagine that they lowered something in the water and it bloop, 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 and made some beeps and told them how deep it was. But that's not what happened. They probably lowered a rope or something that told them how many fathoms. And a fathom, I think, is 6 feet. So they could figure out how deep the water was, and it's getting shallower, so they must be coming up to land. And so they put some anchors off the back of the boat and hope that the anchors will hold. So a lot of stuff going on here that's kind of complicated. What's not complicated is that the men aren't eating, and they're terrified, and they're wondering if they're going to live. And there are 276 people on what must have been a fairly small boat by our standards. And so they're crammed into this boat, and they're worried, and they're wondering. They're starting to throw stuff off the ship, lighten the load, get rid of everything. And so they throw the cargo over, and they throw the tackle, the ropes and stuff. They throw it all in the water. So there's nothing left on the boat but them. And Paul says, God is going to see us through this. Just hang on. Don't panic and don't despair. Which is always a good word for us. No matter how difficult life gets, no matter how inevitable the end seems, don't panic and don't despair. We'll see you tomorrow.